in the Biden administration's push to adopt electric vehicles, or EVs, and phase out gas-powered ones, it's reasonable to expect there's some bump in the road. In every state, there's an acknowledged need to develop needed infrastructure and charging stations. And without a massive increase in these stations, widespread adoption of EV just isn't realistic. Now, state budgets are seeing billions of dollars collectively carved out for this purpose, all on top of the Biden administration's $7.5 billion plan on a nationwide network of 500,000 new charging stations. Meanwhile, states that rely on gas taxes for billions in revenue are anxious to find a way to make up for the loss when drivers stop needing all that lucrative gas. Joining us now, we welcome in the car coach herself, Lauren Fix. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Okay, so for the people who love to drive, the mystique of the open road is a huge part of the appeal. You can drive off into all these unknown with confidence and you won't be stranded. Is investing billions to make charging station as common in gas station, is that going to actually sell more drivers on EV who are still reluctant to switch?
Well, you can tell by the sales. That's sort of, no matter what anybody says and all the propaganda that you hear, when it really comes down to it, all you have to do is look at sales. You're about 2% of sales. Last year, we only had about 14 million in sales because of, obviously, we had a chip shortage and a bunch of other things. But the bottom line is, if only 2% of people have converted, the hype from the mainstream media is telling us the real truth, that they're just not selling. People are not accepting that. There's too many factors, including the slow charging times. It takes hours to get a full charge. Even with the faster charging stations, which are very limited, you get maybe 80% charge in an hour. What are you supposed to do for that hour? We are in a very impatient society. We stand in front of the microwave and go, let's go. So 7 minutes to fill up, get gas, that works. Anything longer, I think the average consumer is just too impatient for that, and they don't want to be limited.
Right. Well, talking about limits, there's this debate about whether these electric vehicles do as well in severe winter weather, something we've seen, and overclaims that they're not as powerful or safe as gas-powered ones. We just saw this happen in I-95. With 14 hours, people were stuck on that interstate. Is there some actual truth to that fear? Are people in a lot of trouble when they can't get near one of these EV stations, like in a winter outage?
Well, that is a problem, and this has been known since day one. Some vehicles have preheaters, so if your car is sitting outside, that would work. But when you're sitting outside for hours on end in your vehicle and maybe starting it every once in a while, hoping that it's enough juice, essentially, to support you for 24 hours, obviously this is not a consistent situation. This could be a problem. And what was happening is, and there were people that reported this, there was over 200 electric vehicles that were stuck on the roadway. They become roadblocks to those vehicles that are gas and diesel powered, which becomes a problem. So there was even a situation where one of the truckers lent one of them a blanket and some hand warmers because they didn't have it, and they were stuck in a vehicle with nothing. So this is just a factor you need to consider. You're going to lose about a third of the battery life in real cold weather. And if you're sitting outside and you're using it on and off, especially if you're using the heated seats and the center screen and the charging, you're just going to use up the juice. It's going to be less time than if you had an equivalent combustion engine or diesel vehicle. So sadly, this is something you need to consider before you make that purchase.
And this, like you said, this isn't anything new. So are manufacturers doing a better job of preparing their owners for that? Do they have backup systems available? And is this something that possibly maybe domestic auto manufacturers could do with their EV vehicles to get them up to par in competition with those international, which are now actually being outpacing here at home?
Well, a lot of manufacturers are offering plug-in hybrids that are also gasoline powered, so you get the best of both worlds. And you're seeing that a lot with different manufacturers, not just the domestics, but also Japanese and Korean. So they're offering the fact that if you're driving around town, you can run on electric. If you're sitting on a highway or you're going longer distances, you're not going to be beholden to a charging station or waiting in line for hours, which happens a lot in California. So it's all the automakers are making those, but the mainstream media and the government is pushing for all electric, no gasoline backup. They want to make it so expensive. If the government had their way, it'd be $10 a gallon for gasoline, and it would be totally difficult to get. but consumers are pushing back. And if they're not going to buy them, no matter what's available, this is going to make a difference because manufacturers can't take a loss on every vehicle and try to make it up in volume.
Absolutely, and the reality of it is right now is people actually are seeing what's happening to the people who are buying and put in tough situations. That being said, this is the first year that we saw an international automaker, Toyota, actually outpace domestic products. Is this going to be the trend moving forward? And is there anything new that domestic manufacturers like Ford and Chevrolet are doing to compete?
Well, Toyota's building product here in the U.S. I've been to their plant.
Right.
They have one in Texas where they're building trucks. They're all over the place, just as Honda is as well. But Toyota outsold General Motors. General Motors had a lot of problems this year, much outside their control, between union issues and, of course, then we had COVID issues. But on top of that, they had all their Bolt EVs, their plug-in electric vehicles got recalled. Then they had a chip shortage, and they got hurt pretty hard on the chip shortage. And Toyota was able to get a supply quicker than other manufacturers. So that put Toyota in the lead, and they've got a lot of product coming out, and I have to give them a lot of credit. They moved their home base to Texas, and they're proud to be Texans, right. And I think that you're going to see a lot more product coming out of there.
And you're right. I think we see probably more international lines being made here in the U.S. than domestic lines are being made outside of our borders. Lauren, always great to chat with you. Thanks for joining me.